Got a 2010 Honda Odyssey, and the customer brought it here for a sliding door upper seal replacement. When he dropped it off, he mentioned something about check engine light and VSA light having come on maybe a couple weeks ago. When I brought it in, no lights are on, nothing crazy that I can feel. Now that I've got everything done, I decided to just scan the whole vehicle and see what trouble codes are logged in the history. And this is the report for the complete system scan. And as you can see, we have a 301 misfire cylinder 1 logged in the computer. Again, there is no check engine light. There is nothing that I currently can sort of feel as a dead miss. And because it seemed that the fault was currently not present, the light wasn't on, and I particularly didn't feel anything when I pulled it in to work on it, I cleared fault memory, cycled key, then started it, got in it, was getting ready to finish this vehicle, and I noticed sitting here in the shop idling that there was a very, very slight stumble that you can hear more than what you can feel. And then once I really paid more attention, there is a very, very slight type of misfire that's not even as strong as what you would consider a fish bite, but it's definitely something that if you pay close attention, you can hear it and feel it. And obviously, based off the trouble code, we can very nonchalantly just throw a coil and plug at it and hope that that would be all that it needs, which in reality, it probably is most likely the cause of what's going on. This vehicle's got about 80,000 miles. So just to try to verify, I decided to set up the scope. Since we're not getting any data on the scanner or any current misfires or no flashing, this is the way I'm going to try to make sure it is cylinder 1. And so what I have set up is I'm going to monitor the crankshaft sensor speed to then try to look for dropouts for a misfire. I've got ignition coil 1 as a sink. Oddly enough, it possibly might need to be replacing that coil. But in the control signal from the ECM, it should not have any effect. And just for giggles, I've got the amp clamp on coil number 1. Just to see if we see anything odd. And lastly, I do have the exhaust pulses being logged on the yellow channel. So try to, again, use two methods, basically crankshaft speed and exhaust, to see if we can tie into cylinder 1. So I'll go ahead and start it up and see. So I'm going to let it idle for a bit and then bring you guys along when we break down the data. As far as how it's running, nothing too crazy. Again, like I said, nothing that would jump out heavily as a true miss, constant miss, or even fish bite miss. So here are the waveforms. This is when we first started the vehicle. As far as the channels, the blue is the crankshaft sensor, the gold is the exhaust trace, green is amperage, and red back there behind the blue is the ignition. And the purple here is a math channel that's created off of the Pico scope based off of the blue trace. So it's going to give us the speed of the crankshaft that's built and created off of this, let's call it graph. You can tell this is when we first cranked it up. So it's a first startup, it speeds up, and then it'll try to stabilize. And then we continue over to the next capture. And so based off of this, this is, again, we're trying to find a misfire, confirm and identify a cylinder so that we can try to make a correct call. Sometimes the exhaust can be difficult to pinpoint because of the fluctuations of time when trying to sync. But a good thing when using the exhaust, at least for me, is I can definitely pick out to see if there is a true misfire currently happening, despite the fact of any scan data or how you might think the engine is running or feeling or sounding. There's no way you can deny the pressure pulses that you capture coming out of the exhaust. If the engine is running smooth on all cylinders, you'll have smooth pulses without any interruptions coming out the exhaust. If we see areas that are disrupted, let's call it, that tells us there is an imbalance of the pulses coming out, basically a misfire. So we can use that as a guide for time in relation to other channels to then try to identify. Here in the bottom, we're going to capture speed fluctuations. Again, if all cylinders are firing evenly, there should be a constant, steady, pulsed speed. If there's any mishap or misfires or change in pressure pulses, we know we're going to have a change in speed as well. So these two can correlate, and then by using ignition, you can try to narrow down a cylinder. You can kind of tell, and this is from a far away zoomed out picture, we've got an anomaly there and also there. Alright guys, and so to kind of just end up showing you the breakdown of how you can use the scope, if we take a look at the exhaust, I've placed a marker in the most obvious, let's call it hiccup or anomaly that we could see there. So I've put up rulers, and if we take a look here, based off of our ignition trace, I ended up using this first ruler that we put where our ignition number 1 strikes, and this second one the next time number 1 strikes. So that gives us 2 full revolutions. It gives us our 4 strokes for cylinder number 1. But in that 720 degree, all of our cylinders will fire. So we break it apart in 6 partitions, let's call it, or columns. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 columns. In order to identify a cylinder in the exhaust trace, you have to plot the firing order. And in order to do that, first of all, our firing order is 1, 4, 2, 5, 3, 6. So in order to find cylinders in this pulses, because you can't use the ignition points to identify cylinders that would correlate with the pulse next to it. No. So each one of these column ruler breakpoints are ignition pulses for each cylinder. So this would be ignition point for cylinder 1, cylinder 4, cylinder 2, cylinder 5, cylinder 3, 6, and then back to ignition 1. But as far as our columns, we are trying to identify exhaust pulses per cylinder. So in order to do that, you jump over to the halfway point, which is 360, that ruler marker at 360, and the column to the left is going to be our identifying exhaust pulse column for whichever cylinder ignition you are synced on. So for me, I am synced on cylinder 1. So if I go 360, look to the column here next to the left, this is exhaust activity portion column for cylinder 1. if I was synced on cylinder 2, 4, 6, whatever, we go here, then to the left, that's going to be that cylinder, and then each column afterwards is just the next one in the firing order. So if this is column 1, if you remember, then this column is going to be 4, and then 2, 5, 3, 6, back to 1. So that's how you use the column breakdown to identify cylinder exhaust pulses in the exhaust trace. And here clearly we see an activity in the column before the halfway point, which is column 4 cylinder number 1, which, and you must forgive me, this is the way this sensor reads. It pulls up in voltage for vacuum, so it can be confusing for you guys, but just know that this activity uprise in vacuum is due to the misfire from the exhaust pulse during the exhaust stroke. When the exhaust valve opens for cylinder 1, we've got vacuum because of a misfire, and so that's us being able to identify cylinder 1 with the exhaust trace. Now if we do the same and come down to the crankshaft speed pattern, this is not a great and by no means any ideal capture of the math channel for the crankshaft speed sensor. It takes a few tries to get the correct settings to be able to get an ideal looking pattern. And what I mean by ideal, as you can see, these are kind of just straight, never mind these let's call it teeth, but we've got like straight portions, and it's just very jagged and square, let's call it. Ideally you want humps that are just kind of continuous. Each time an ignition fires, it's going to speed up the crankshaft speed. So we fire, we speed up, we fire, we speed up, we fire, we speed up. So you want the trace, when it goes up in voltage, that's acceleration. So we fire, acceleration, we fire, acceleration. Now if we get to a point where the next cylinder is supposed to fire, but it doesn't, it can't drive it upwards. It's gonna continue traveling downwards from this peak point. Now it's traveling down because it's waiting to fire to accelerate up. But since there is no firing in the next cylinder in line, the speed continues to go downwards, and so we slow the crankshaft speed. And then once we fire again, you'll see it shoot back up in the trace. So it'll dip down further than these other guys, and then it'll shoot back up. And if you can imagine, it's like a level here of where they dip and then rise back up. This will dip way past that because there was no firing, no acceleration. It slows down until the next guy comes up, and it'll start to bring itself up to that level with each strike. So we clearly don't have any humps, but just off experience, I can already tell that we have a drop here in speed. So we're still creating a math channel. It's just not detailed enough to see each firing event, but the upward level in voltage is still faster speed, downward is still slowing in speed. And so what we can tell here, which is there's a dramatic change despite the fact that we don't have great detail, so that's still usable. We have a drop in speed here, and then we've got stair-stepped events that bring it back up. Now, we dropped because this was our ignition strike for cylinder 1. It never got it to accelerate upwards in speed or stay continuously level with the other cylinders. And so it traveled downwards until the next guy fired, and you can tell that now we stabilized because we went across. We did not continue going down. We stabilized, went across. We fired again here with this next cylinder. We stabilized. We fire again. And now, as this crankshaft starts to speed up, our level raises back up to our, let's call it, nominal stable point at idle. So this right here, we're watching the speed. We're identifying cylinder 1 when it fired, didn't accelerate it, and so it slowed it down. And now each other one working properly speeds it back up after the stabilization there. And we're using another form to identify the misfire. Now, these two can correlate. Let me bring that channel down. Now, you can tell that we've got a drop first and then a vacuum pulse second. And that just ties 100% everything with cylinder 1, because this is our, after our compression, we want to light off the flame, air-fuel mixture, and then exhaust comes afterwards. So we've got ignition happening. We didn't combust properly, so we slowed down, and then we open the exhaust valve, and then we see the misfire from the incomplete combustion. We see it in the exhaust trace second and or afterwards. And so that's, you know, we're displaying, we're showing, we're capturing pretty cool detail information that put the nail into cylinder 1 for the cause of what we are experiencing. And so you take that information, you now have a 100% guaranteed form of data that is going to tie you and lead you to cylinder 1. Now it's up to you to find the actual true cause. Obviously, it can be a coil, could be a spark plug, could be an injector, could be mechanical, like valve sealing issues, so on and so forth. But we know that our slight stumble, again, it's barely even a fish bite, something that you would kind of feel very almost pronounced and definitely have no check engine flashing, so on and so forth. This one's to a very, very minute level, but it's enough to feel for someone that's kind of experienced and or looking for it. And we were able to use true 100% captured data to help us find out which cylinder it was. Yes, naturally, the scanner told us at some point it saw cylinder number 1 misfire. But the reasons why I make these videos and I show you those different ways of identifying and so on and so forth is because I always put myself in a situation and or scenario where it's not going to be this easy. Imagine there was no trouble codes that would lead you. There's no mode 6 data, no nothing. This is a perfect, undeniable way to pick something out that you can be 100% sure with. So with that, I'm not going to go in crazy trying to do in-cylinder and so on and so forth or check fuel. I'm simply going to put a coil and plug in it and just see how it does. But other than that, I hope you took something from this, that you learned something, and we'll get this wrapped up and move on to the next one.